I want to get straight into this because I've got quite a lot to cover today. So the first thing you'll notice is I picked this image of Ryan from his bookshop, The Painted Porch, just to get a feel for Ryan as an author. Obviously, I'm familiar with his work. I've read a few of his books. So, and I've watched his videos on YouTube, so I know kind of Ryan's personality, and I've kind of tried to incorporate that into this presentation. I looked at his book design for the front covers, and on the right hand side is kind of where I lent to, because this is Ryan's The Stoic Virtues series, and I liked the pastel colours in there. I liked the muted colours, and I wanted to try and incorporate that into the deck design. As I was going through my idea stage for Ryan's presentation, I looked at like what this quote could look like. This is one I took from one of his talks, and I jotted that down as an idea. And then I looked what kind of colours were around in the Roman Empire. What would Roman emperors wear? So making that connection back to Stoicism, which is what Ryan's known for in terms of his knowledge, his study into Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus and Socrates, the great Stoic philosophers from ancient Rome and Greece. I wanted to try and take some of that, those traditions, colours and inspiration from that time and bring it back into the deck. And as I went through my ideas, I looked at some of the typography, and this is kind of a watercolor painting of what Marcus Aurelius might look like. I looked at some different typography. I wanted a combination between sans serif and serif font. The serif font being more connection to the ancient, more formal, but again, just making that mirror to ancient Rome, ancient Greece. And if you didn't know something about Ryan, he's a big fan of Iron Maiden, Up the Irons, and also Metallica, he's mentioned before in a couple of talks. And I saw this font Metallica here, so these are my kind of 3 shortlists, and I was like, okay, Metallica, that works. But I didn't go with that one, and I didn't use antiquated, even though that could maybe work for the ancient Rome quotes or the ancient Greek philosophy quotes. I went with this one on the far right side, which is Balkist, because it had the word kind of Balkan in it, where my family's from, so hence the choice there. And I liked how I liked how nice the typography was, so I ended up using that. So I'm going to kind of present this now as I would if kind of talking you through. So what I did is I took one of Ryan's talks off YouTube, where he gave a presentation to, I think it was a USC team in the States. I'll dig out the talk and put it in a link in a comment so you could check it out. But I took the core concepts from this talk and re-visualized them, and also I kind of adapted a little bit the structure and flow of some of the slides to help if Ryan was to do this presentation again, to make it more engaging and succinct. So the background slide, in terms of the colour, I went for this kind of offset purple, which is to do with ancient Rome and Greek philosophy. So again, royalty in the purple, but trust and also prestige in terms of the overall look, with the combination of the gold, and again carrying over the sans serif font from Ryan's books, using the reef that I saw in the quote as the background. So this was kind of like my base style that I wanted to use. So in the talk, Ryan talks about ego is the enemy, and this was a divider slide that I came up with to introduce each topic, to allow the presenter to pause and let that concept or idea, core idea, sit with the audience. In the presentation, Ryan talks about ego as a shield to make us feel less scared, and we use ego to kind of protect ourselves from different things, from getting hurt, from feeling rejection, fear of failure. And I designed this Roman shield here based off some of the research I did before into Roman shields, and I really like that. That was handcrafted in PowerPoint. You can actually make cool diagrams and icons in PowerPoint if you know what you are doing with the drawing tool. Then Ryan goes on to talk about, in life, everyone experiences the 3 phases of life, which is aspiring to achieve our goals and dreams, having a period of success, and then having to overcome adversity and challenges before we then, look to aspire again to new goals. And I wanted to visualize this as kind of a ring to show you that journey. He talks about adopting a student mindset and the importance of that. And he mentions this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was a famous US philosopher, where he said, "Every man I meet is a master in some point, and that I learn from him." And I like this quote a lot, and I wanted just to visualize it a bit more prominently, and I went with this kind of terracotta feel, which again connects back to Rome and to ancient Greece, maybe the colors of the time, and again using the gold to highlight key pieces of information. And he talks about seeking wisdom from every source. So I wanted to make the connection between the source of a river and the source of wisdom. And so it goes on to talk about Socrates, that he was aware of his own ignorance. So Socrates was a famous Stoic of the Greek times. And it talks about keeping ego in check and what that means for our own leadership when we're part of a team. As the leader of the team, you need to keep your ego in check and not believe your own hype, especially in the sports. In sports, for example, which is what Ryan was talking about. And then he goes on to mention that success can often be a double-edged sword when we start to believe our own hype. We let ego get in the way of our own humility, and it's about staying grounded in your own values. And what that means is not not wasting your time arguing what a good man is like, but just being one. Is that the quote from Marcus Aurelius, making that connection just to kind of not worrying about what other people think and just being yourself, being your natural self. And in the talk, Ryan mentions about Marcus Aurelius' life. When he became an emperor, he came into his position as emperor in debt. And one of the first things he did was to sell off some of the palace furniture and kind of fittings and fixtures which weren't worth anything, because he wanted to put things right. But that was a hard thing to do as an emperor at the time. And he has this quote, "Do the right things, especially when it's hard." And I loved that. And I got here a statue of Marcus Aurelius to emphasize that message. And in this part of the talk, I added this idea of lead by example, not by authority, and try to get a picture here which would represent that statement. As the talk progresses, we look at what embracing adversity means and turning obstacles into opportunities. So again, I want to make the metaphor of finding a way out from a maze, of kind of figuring out your thoughts and turning them into opportunities. He also mentioned this quote from very successful entrepreneur Ben Horowitz, where he said, "The hard thing isn't dreaming big. The hard thing is waking up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. And that's when the dream turns into a nightmare." So again, it was talking about how sometimes your dreams can become more of a challenge when things don't go right, when we have to overcome failure or adversity. It's how we handle that in those moments. And he talked about focus on what you can control. So Epictetus said, identify and separate so that I can clearly say to myself which are the externals not under my control and which I have to do with the choices that I actually control. So he's talking about here that we can separate the matters we can control, which are in our own control, and the ones that are external that we can't do anything about, and just focusing on what we can control within our own self. And so we then go on to talk about this concept from Warren Buffett, which is about your own inner scorecard. And Warren Buffett has this thing where he has his own inner scorecard that he measures himself by. So have your own one where you measure your own standards by, not by external standards or someone else's set opinion of you or society's pressure to you about what you need to achieve and where you need to be in life, but having your own internal measure, which I think is really important. And again, that comes back to Stoicism, about seeking continuous improvement and not validation from others, and being true to your own self and not following what's happening externally, but actually following our own values and staying true to our own belief system. He then talked about this concept from when Malcolm X was in prison and how he used that dead time to become alive, to learn how to read, to learn and teach himself valuable lessons. And then obviously through that process he became Malcolm X. And then there was a little bit of a segue into post-traumatic growth and what that means, overcoming adversity, and how in life when we overcome challenges and obstacles we actually grow as a person, and we become stronger because of that adversity. And then finally, to wrap up the presentation, the idea of amor fati, to love one's fate, to embrace the concept that we're on this journey and that it is our fate to live our life, to follow our path, to become the best version of ourselves, to live in the present moment, to stay grounded in our values and virtues, regardless of what's happening externally. And I left this question to the audience. This is where I added some key takeaways in Ryan's talk, like what would your inner scorecard look like if you created one today? I think that is the key message or key question I would want to leave the audience after this presentation. And then with every talk that I work on, I always include 3 key takeaways for the audience. So in Ryan's talk, it was recognize and manage your ego, maintain a student mindset, and then finally develop an inner scorecard. And I've given a bit more concept to what that could be for the audience. Finally, the Stoic idea of memento mori, which is that remember that you must die, and that we are all going to die one day, and that we should live and embrace every opportunity that we have in life and the time that we spend with our family and friends, and be grateful and appreciative that in the end we have to embrace our own fate, that we will die one day. Unfortunately, we all have to embrace it. And then finally, to end the presentation, I designed this call to action slide for Ryan, which is join me at the Daily Stoic, which if you haven't been to thedailystoic.com, have a look. Also, Ryan's podcast, The Daily Stoic, is one of my top 5 podcasts of all time, and I listen to it regularly. And finally, to promote his latest book, which is Right Thing, Right Now, which has been featured in the New York Times and the Sunday Times in the UK. So I wanted to add that kudos and those authority logos again at the end, and leave the audience with something to check out from Ryan. So that is my presentation and what I would do with Ryan Holiday's slides if we work together. If you would like the opportunity to have a one-to-one deck review with me so that I can give you some insights to help you improve your presentations and make them more impactful, scan the QR code, and I would love for you to take my short quiz and we can see if we'd be a good fit together. And if you go on my profile, you can click on either one of those links. The left one is to apply for a slide review, a one-to-one with me, and the right hand side is to check out my guides and templates that I have. I've created some presentation templates that you can use to create great looking slides like some of the ones I've shown you today. I also have a free 66-page presentation preparation checklist, say that 3 times fast, which I would love you to download. As I said, it's completely free. It will just help you when you're preparing for your talks and presentations to overcome an anxiety or nerves that you may feel that you're finding, like everyone else, that's natural before doing a big talk or presentation. And that's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Take care for now.